Hi there everyone, this is Tom from OneSight Solutions. Today I'm going to attempt to give you an overview and then demonstrate how to use certificates correctly with Niagara 4. This is a potentially infinitely meaty subject. Public-private key infrastructure certificates, TLS, SSL, all of that. You can go infinitely in depth with it. And it's a fundamental keystone of modern digital communications, if you like. So I can't tell you everything about it, and we certainly don't have time to go over the majority of it. So what we're going to do today is just focus on the specifics of how to get Niagara functioning correctly using a signed certificate, either from a private internal CA that you're likely to find with a large client that has a managed IT infrastructure and their own public-private key system, or one that you get from a public CA such as GoDaddy, 1&1, FastHost, etc. So let's start just by taking a look at my local platform here. This is a fresh install in Niagara 4.7. And let's take a look at certificate management. The first thing you're going to notice is this. Now, if you've been using Niagara 4 or even recent versions of AX, you're all going to be familiar with this certificate, the Tridium certificate. Essentially what this is it's the default self-generated, self-signed certificate that a Niagara system supervisor or Chase will create when first commissioned, first built. You see it's given itself the alias of Tridium. It's issued by Niagara 4. It's just very, very, very generic, and it's been created by itself. Self-signed is the important thing to note here, because this here is the reason why when you go and install Niagara 4, which is HTTPS and FOXS by default, and you go to create a connection to it, you get the connection not trusted error in the web browser. You get the little box appear in Niagara when making a FOXS connection to the station saying do you want to accept or reject. This is the reason that is happening, is your client machine cannot and does not trust this certificate. That's because Niagara has signed it itself, and there is no way for you to know that this system is who it says it is. So at this point, it's worth me giving you a brief overview on what's known as a chain of trust. So effectively, any certificate that's issued has to be issued by a certificate authority or certification authority, CA for short. What that is an entity that's been elected as a trusted authority. So in the case of all the big global certificate authorities that issue certificates to the likes of Google, BBC, NASA, anything basically. It's usually government organisations or bodies that have said you are a trusted body, you can operate a root certification authority. In Europe it will be RIPE, America it will be IANA, and many more throughout the globe. And from that top layer where you've got the root certification authorities, they might run, or other big organisations but not root level organisations might run their own intermediates to provide enough coverage to provide the service, to meet the demand of the service globally. So what that means is we must trust someone to issue certificates to us, or to any websites we visit, any other things we visit. The best way to have a quick look at that is if we look at a website like the BBC, we can view the certificate. And there you go, it's issued to the BBC in all subdomains. That's known as a wildcard certificate. And it's been issued by GlobalSign, particularly GlobalSign Organisation Validation CA. If we look at the certification path, you'll see the full chain of trust. So here's our service certificate that the BBC website is presenting us. There is the actual CA that issued it. And there is the very root CA that actually said that CA can be a CA. And that's known as a chain of trust. And usually an application will require the full chain of trust, or a client will require the full chain of trust in order to be able to trust that a certificate it's being presented with is genuine. If we have a quick look at the Microsoft certificate store, you can see there's a folder here called Trusted Root Certification Authorities. And by default, out the box, all modern operating systems, this one being Windows 10, come shipped with a copy of all of the current Trusted Root CA certificates. And therefore, we automatically trust by default certificates such as these we've just seen on the BBC website, the Google homepage here, the certificate here. The reason we trust these and we're not getting errors is because our operating system, our client machine, trusts the root certification authorities that ultimately made their certificates possible. If we have a quick look in Niagara, you'll see this in the system trust store as well. It by default includes the root CA certificates for all of the major global CAs. And the reason this is done and included by default in a lot of modern operating systems and applications is if it wasn't, every website you'd be going to, 9 times out of 10 you'd be getting an error saying this certificate's not trusted, the chain of trust isn't complete. So all of the big ones their trusted roots are included by default to make using the internet a pleasant experience and not a pain. So let's jump right into this, and we're going to start with a brand new fresh station I've literally just created. So this will be using the default Tridium certificate. The station's not doing anything, it is literally a fresh one, but I'm going to take advantage of that so I can show you this. So the station is running on my local machine here, so HTTPS by default as we know, and I am then going to go 127.0.0.1, that's known as a loopback address or local host if anyone doesn't know, and I'm going to go. Oh, there we go, your connection is not private. Now, as I said earlier, this is because out of the box that station is going to be running with the only certificate it has available, which is the self-signed Tridium one, which my client cannot trust. So let's take a look at that. And there we go, it's the Niagara 4 certificate, it's got a year validity on it, and there is no certification path, it's been self-signed. So you'll probably all be familiar with this, having to click advanced and proceed, and then it works, but you're always going to get that. This can be repeated if we then go to make a station connection. There we go, the supply certificate could not be validated. In this particular case, both of these will be true. The certificate was issued for a different address. That's because in the subject or the name of the certificate, it's Niagara 4. Whereas I'm actually connecting to an address called Tom ThinkPad or 127.0.0.1. And it's also not issued by a trusted authority. But I can accept that and proceed to connect. At this point I'm going to say that is by design of public-private key infrastructure. If you don't trust something, you've got to flag up an error or disallow the connection completely. If there was an option to just ignore that and let you go for it, then that effectively breaks the validation element or the authentication element of what TLS SSL tried to achieve. Okay, so now we're ready to start our first example, and in this one we're going to create a certificate in Niagara, and then we're going to submit a sign-in request to an internal certificate authority. So this is very much like what you'd have to do if a client, might be a large client with their own large managed IT infrastructure, has asked you to use their certificates or integrate to their certificate environment properly. The process is fairly similar to what you'd do if using a public CA. However, you won't be handling the signing of the certificate or and any of that. All you will do is generate the request, give it to them, say the client's IT department, and they'll provide you with the root certificate, any intermediates, and your server certificate back. So I'm going to play the role of the client's IT department here. So you won't see what I do, because I will actually be signing it with a live internal OneSight Solutions certificate authority server. But we will go through the whole process, what you'd have to do if you're in the same situation with a real client, real job. So first things first, we're going to open a platform of our Niagara system. I've tried to replicate a real scenario as best I can. So I have internal DNS set up, pointing to my machine here, certguide.OnesightSolutions. You could do this on IP addresses, but if a client's asked you to deploy certificates properly, it's highly likely that they've got DNS running as well. Right. So here we are. We just open the certificate manager. And the first thing we want to do is create a new certificate. The alias is a friendly name. It's not actually used for anything in this case, but it doesn't hurt just to make it the actual name on the certificate. The CN will be in the subject, and it is the name on the certificate. It's going to want to match the string or the address that you're using to connect to this Niagara system on with. So if the clients are using a web browser to view station graphics, make sure that you put in this box, common name, what they're going to be typing into their web browsers. So if that was a IP address 10.0.1.5 or whatever, or if it's a DNS name like this, guide.OnesightSolutions, make sure that's on the certificate. Got a year validity. The validity period is something you're going to need to bear in mind. Certificates do have validity periods. Usually they're kept relatively short for server certificates or client certificates. For security purposes, a certificate can be revoked, and the year validity keeps the keys cycling. Keeps the keys cycling on a relatively regular basis in the interest of security. If you look at, say, a CA certificate, CA server certificate, it's probably got a much longer validity of, say, 5-10 years. But we'll stick with the 1 year for this. And a client that's asking you to do certificates will probably have their own policy on what the validity period is meant to be. So there we go. Okay, there we got our certificate. Note the orange thing, it's not trusted or anything, not signed. And from there, it's always good practice to export the cert, and particularly the private key. The private key is almost like the master set. You need it to be able to understand the entire certificate. You can't read the whole certificate without both key pairs, but the whole key pair. But it's important that you keep the private key safe and only you have it, because the private key is what was used to generate your certificate effectively. So if you lose it, people could effectively impersonate you. So I've got my cert guide folder here I created earlier, and I'm just going to create a folder called key, and I'm going to save my private key and certificate in there. Next thing I want to do is generate certificate request. Click OK, and again I'm going to save that. Now I'm just going to quickly show you what the CSR looks like. Okay, so in there you see a PEM file which will contain our certificate with the private key. I'll quickly show you. There you go, the private key and then the certificate. And the certificate sign and request here looks like that. So this is the information here that you would need to provide to a client's IT department or whoever's handling the certificates for you. This contains all the information that we just entered when creating the certificate, and they will give it to their certificate authority server for signing, and you'll get a signed certificate back along with the root CA certificate and any intermediate CA certificates. So I'm going to play that role now. I'm going to take this certificate request away to the OneSight Solutions internal certificate authority, sign it, and provide the root certificate of the CA back along with the service certificate. So I'm just going to pause the video here and I'll be back shortly. Hello again, guys. Okay, so I'm back from taking that CSR that we created earlier. I have signed it using the OneSight Solutions internal certificate authority, and I have given us back two things. This here is the service certificate, which is signed and we're going to install into Niagara. And this one here is the public side of my CA root certificate. Now, Niagara's a little bit particular about how you import a chain of trust. Some applications or some systems prefer you to insert the root or any intermediate certificates into the trust store first, and then the service certificate into the application last. Niagara prefers to have a full chain file created in PEM format that contains all of those things in one. So the way we do that is quite simple. We create ourselves a new text file. The first thing we do is open our certificate with a text editor, the service certificate this is, and we copy everything, making sure to include the beginning and end lines. Make sure that's at the top of our text file. Next thing we do is we take any intermediates we were given and we put them on the lines below. In this case, however, we're a smaller company and we don't have a need for any intermediate CAs below our root. So we take the root CA certificate and we paste that in below. So what we have here is our chain file. So I'm going to rename this to a .pem extension. A PEM is a container for multiple PEM formatted certificates. You notice that the CRT, they look the same as what they do in the PEM file, but a PEM is more of a container for a chain of certificates. So now that we have our full chain here, we can come back into Niagara and we click import, and we import our full chain. And there we go. That takes our root CA certificate and our service certificate straight in. And you see there we've now got the green tick for trusted and signed with our alias and our correct subject. If you open that up there, you'll see the CN under the subject is the domain name for this machine as well. So next thing to do is actually apply that certificate to the station web server. Like so. Web service property sheet, and you see you've got a line HTTPS cert. So if we come in here, we can select our new certificate and we can save that. If we now open a web browser, you'll see there that we've connected with HTTPS to certguide.int.onesight.solutions. We've got no errors, no warnings. We have a valid certificate, connection is secure. If we open it, we can see that it's issued to certguide.int.onesight.solutions, which is exactly the same address we're typing in. It's issued by the OSS internal CA, and you can see that as reflected in the certification path. Just a quick note, my client machine already trusts the OSS internal CA in its root trust store, because it is a genuine certificate that we actually use. So that's in the web browser, so we can quickly do that to the Fox service as well. And disconnect our station. And if we go to platform administration, change TLS settings, we can also do it for the platform. Go changing the public key, we've got to accept that. Okay, this is essentially because it was connected with one certificate and it stores it. And we've just tried to connect and it's presented our new correct certificate. So all that's doing is letting us know that, hang on a minute, the certificate's changed. And there we go. We now have a full TLS secured session to the platform station and HTTPS in the web browser using a proper signed certificate in Niagara. That was using an internal CA, like I say, but that's almost exactly what will happen if you're asked to do it as part of a job for a client. They'll likely have their own signing process internally, their own certificate authority, and they will sign the certificate for you. Just coming up next in this video, I'm going to take you over a similar procedure, but we'll be doing this with a public certificate authority. The process will differ quite slightly, and depending on which certificate authority you use, whether it's GoDaddy, 1&1, Fasthosts, SSL Shopper, or anything, their web interfaces differ, their processes differ, the formats of their certificates can actually differ as well. So we can't cover everything, but what we will be able to show you is how they give you the certificates back, because sometimes I like to include them as a bundle with lots of intermediates as well. So it's worth going over that shortly, but do bear in mind there are minor differences from certificate authority to certificate authority. So the process will almost never be identical, but the purpose of this video, particularly the second half of the video, is to give you a feel for what you need to do and what the general process is. So I'll be back shortly, and hope this has been helpful so far. Hi again, guys. So now we're on the final part of this certificate guide video, and we're now going to generate a sign-in request from Niagara, and we're going to submit that to a major public certificate authority. In this case, I'm using GoDaddy. I'll just show you here. I've purchased a standard SSL certificate, and we're ready to set that up. So first thing we need to do is, in the certificate manager of our Niagara platform, create that certificate. I'm going to do this for the domain name test.onesight.solutions. When using a public CA, one thing that differs from an internal CA is you will need to be able to prove ownership of the domain you're using. There are various ways to do that. In this case, I'm going to use email verification, as I have the webmaster administrator email address associated with said domain. And my domain test.onesight.solutions is pointing at this PC. So I'll quickly show you what it looks like currently. I have been on this earlier, so you didn't see the error, but there we go. It's using the standard Tridium certificate. So back in Niagara, just going to enter the domain name that I want the certificate for. Test.onesight.solutions. Fill out this information. One-year validity. It's a server certificate. And the email address, just one for administration. Okay, then we have our certificate here. At this point, I always like to export the private key. Put that somewhere safe. For the sake of this demonstration, it's just going in a folder on my desktop. Okay, we now need to generate the certificate request. Place that in there. Now if we go into that folder, you'll see the CSR is there. And there's our certificate request. We'll just copy that to the clipboard. Go back to GoDaddy where we've got our SSL certificate that we purchased earlier. At the time when you buy and pay for it, it just sits there as a container ready to be set up. So we've already paid for this SSL certificate and it's now ready for us to click the setup button. This exact process will likely differ from CA to CA. I'm using GoDaddy because I've used them in the past and they are quite a big popular one, but there are many out there. So I don't have this domain in my GoDaddy account. I'm going to input a CSR that we've generated from Niagara. There we go. It's picked up the domain. And here is the domain control validation step. So there are a couple of different ways you can do it. If this is a standard web server that you have access to, you can add a text record to the DNS entry for it. And it will pick that up, or you can just get it to send an email to one of these. So in this case, I'm just going to get it to send an email. Just leave the default SSH-A2 signature algorithm. Okay, and it's going to email me now to complete the domain control validation. Okay, so you can see here I've received a couple of emails for domain access verification from GoDaddy. I've received two because I've got a couple of different aliases on my email account, administrator and admin at the domain name. So it sends it to all to make sure you get it. I've just received the same thing twice. So I've got that. Click the approval link. And then we get the option to approve. Okay. So I've just completed that verification as you saw. And I've now received an email saying my SSL certificate has been issued, so we can download it by following this link. And here's our 1 year standard SSL certificate for test.onesight.solutions. So we can download this here. And it's going to ask you for a server type. If we just go with a popular one, obviously Niagara isn't going to be an option here. We'll go for Apache, the world's most popular web server, arguably. And we download a zip file. Just copy this zip into our working folder. Right, so this one with the random string of characters as its name is our server certificate for test.onesight.solutions. And if we have a quick look at that, there we go. And this one is known as a bundle. So what will be in here is the GoDaddy root along with any intermediates. And there we go. So as is the same in the previous video where we use an internal certificate authority, we need to construct a PEM formatted certificate chain. And that will consist of our certificate at the top, followed by any intermediates and the root at the bottom. Save that. And make sure it's got the .pem extension. Okay, and now we'll be ready to import that into Niagara. So here we are with our Niagara Certificate Manager again. You can see it's currently got the yellow shield there, so it's not signed, not trusted. And we've just created our certificate chain in PEM format, and we're ready to import it. Here's our chain. Open that, OK that, and it should come in and go green. Next thing we need to do is tell the station's web server to use our new certificate here. So we just make a connection to our station. Config services web service. And we should be able to select our new certificate here and save. At this point, we can also do the same for the Fox service here, and you can also do the same for the platform here. So now is the moment of truth. Open a web browser, HTTPS, our domain name, which was test.onesight.solutions, hit go, and there we go, no errors, and we've got the padlock, HTTPS, connection is secure, our certificate is valid, it's issued to test.onesight.solutions by the GoDaddy Secure Certificate Authority, it's got the year validity there, and you can see the full certification path there. So guys, that just about concludes this overview and guide on using certificates. Like I say, public key, private key infrastructure and certificates, TLS, it is a subject that warrants a career of its own. It can go infinitely in depth, like I say, but I just wanted to show you in these videos how you use Niagara in an environment that requires you to use certificates properly. And as the industry moves forward and security becomes more and more at the forefront of everyone's minds, you're going to find requirements coming up in projects that include full certificate signing, full certificate management. And that may mean in public cases you need to use public CAs by yourself. You might need to even run your own certificate authority and provide it as a service to clients potentially, or the client may have their own, as I've demonstrated in an earlier step by using the OneSight internal one. But just a quick look, you can see there that green tick, the shield, and the test in the browser to make sure you've got no errors and it's all showing up means we're good. So that concludes this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's helpful. Please check out OneSight.solutions for the services and products training we offer, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you.